All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third installment of this month's computer literacy seminars. So far, we've been doing a lot of web development, and so this is going to be building a dynamic web page. My name is Caitlin Moats, and this is jointly hosted between IT and the Center for Data Science. Very excited that you guys are all here. I'm going to turn this over to Daniil, and he's going to talk to you today about building a dynamic web page.
Okay, hope you're excited. I hope everybody brought their laptops. Okay, so just a short introduction to what dynamic means. So dynamic content on a website or having a dynamic website basically means that it's not just a text, it's not just there to display information. If you can click, it can do something, it can display some form of videos, audio, but not just that, you can actually interact with the elements on the website. And usually that dynamicity or that ability to be dynamic, to interact, is implemented in two ways. But it's always implemented in some form of those two ways. So first, it's something called server-side rendering. Second is something called client-side rendering. We're not going to cover a lot about either of those. We're just going to introduce the ideas. If you're interested more, come to me. Better yet, come to Mr. Brian. He knows much more, and he is a teacher. So he will probably explain it in a much better detail. But until recently, until recently, PHP was like a viable option. And even now, it's still sometimes used, but mostly nowadays, everything is done in JS, every kind of dynamic thing on the website. And the big difference is JavaScript, or just JS for short. Is usually client-side rendering, while PHP is usually, or at least was usually used as a server-side rendering language. So the minus, or one of the flaws of the client-side rendering is that it requires certain power on the side of the user. But with nowadays, we have even our phones are tall enough and have enough computing power. So it's actually paradoxically faster than server-side rendering just because of how internet works and how data travels. So paradoxically, even though it does require a little bit more power on the side of the user, in practice, it's actually faster and much more efficient. And yeah, if you want to be able to make a website for any other purpose than just displaying text or video, that's probably a way to go. So we are going to have like a 5-minute introduction to JavaScript, just so that we understand the syntax, understand the semantics. So JavaScript is a weakly typed scripting language. Anybody knows what weakly typed means? Yes.
You have to declare your types.
Yes, and it sounds like an awesome idea until you code in Java for a year and a half, and then you go to JavaScript, and you're not sure whether it's an int or a function, or it's a component, or it's a website. You're not sure. It can be anything at any point. That's why in industry they usually use TypeScript, which allows you to specify the type. Much more convenient, much better. Use it. But if you want to have some fun, I guess you can use JavaScript, just only JavaScript. So usually to run it, you run it on a web server, or not web server, on a web browser. Sorry, but you can also just download like a Node.js on your local machine or anywhere and run it there, run it locally. So you don't need browser technically. And it's at least how I was started and how it's used in practice with React and with modern paradigm is used more in functional way than object-oriented programming. So 2 minutes introduction to difference. Object-oriented programming is kind of speaks to itself. You have an object, then you have things that inherit from that object, called instances of that object, and those instances interact with one another. They're like, if you have like an idea of a port card, you have like a blueprint. It's going to be your class or your object, and then the instance is going to be like, okay, this is like my particular Honda code or Ford Fiesta, whatever car it is. In functional paradigm, it's powered by maths, so you don't specify as much what you're doing as much as you specify what you want to do. Like, what's my target output? What not as much as like how do I want those things to interact. I know it sounds a little bit abstract, but we are going to see it right now in action. Yeah. So you don't need to follow. This is going to be just like a 1-minute introduction to JavaScript, just so you know the syntax. But if you want, you could, yes, follow along.
1 second, got to reshare the screen. There you go.
So again, Node.js is just a sign that it's run on Node.js because this is where JavaScript is on. So as you can see probably here, this red keyword, sometimes you use var. We used to use var more often. Nowadays, red is considered better practice because of scoping things or scoping issues. Not necessarily issues, but I guess traits. There's also something called const. Const just means that it's an object that's not going to change, that's not going to reference another thing. But that is what you usually use more often. So here we just create a list. This is the syntax. So just regular brackets. And paradoxically, in JavaScript, you can mix different types of objects or different data types, data structures, sorry, in one list. So you can have few numbers, then you can have, as you can see here, 2 strings that appear to be numbers, but they're not. Then this is where our functional paradigm comes in. So there are a couple functions, they're called lambda functions in JavaScript. Not JavaScript, I think they're called everywhere lambda functions. Is where, as I said, you don't necessarily specify all the details. You kind of specify, okay, this is what I want to do. And here, for example, we have a function called map that just gets through all of the numbers within the array or within the list, gets each number individually, divides it by 2. And what you get is this. If you saw, actually, like kind of funny, but 7, even though it's a string, is treated like a number. So now it becomes a number. That's why JavaScript is not very easy for beginners, because you think you have a string, but you divide it by 2 and it becomes a number, paradoxically. So this is a filter, also very functional. You just say, iterate for each element in the array, and just say if it's not a tree, you can keep it. If it's a tree, toss it away. Again, here you see we don't have any trees. Tree is skipped. This is our function. So this is how we define a function in JavaScript. It's a function keyword, name of the function, arguments. Differently from Java, which Java is how you usually introduce to programming in academia. There is no specified return type, so you can return anything. In this case, you actually return in a function. So you return an expression, which will, well, you return in a function that returns an expression. I guess that's a better way of doing it. So here, again, you specify this to arguments. Then one of the arguments is one of the arguments is kind of assumed here. And this is how you call it. You specify the outer function, and then it returns an inner function, this thing. So that's why you first specify length and width, and then you can play around with the height inside it. So yeah, this is like 3 minutes introduction to JavaScript, just so that you understand what we're going to do. Because what we're going to see, even in our small introduction with jQuery, is that there is no classes, there is no like communication per se. It's just a function that does it what it's asked to do. So yeah, you can.
I'll just hit F5.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so this is our first demo. So as I said, we're going to return, and then just like a very short note, but there's a reason why there's so many libraries and frameworks in JavaScript. And the reason is that that server side and client side rendering is not really like a dichotomy that it's either one or another. It's kind of like a whole continuum. And until, well, even now, the majority of the programs, they moved more toward client side rendering. But from what I've heard of people in industry, I had some friends that work in big companies, say that actually it becomes more and more popular to get back to server-side programming. server-side rendering, sorry, because the tools and the libraries that work with it are becoming much more efficient, much better. So it's slowly transitioning back. My assumption is that if you have enough time, it may transition back to client-side, and I'll go back and forth for every decade or two. So again, just small review. For the client side, the script is rendering, and everything on the page is basically a JavaScript file that is being given to a computer or to a node or to laptop, to your phone, anything. It loads it, and that JavaScript contains each element as belong to those tags. Basically, the JavaScript has all those tags inside, and it just renders on the page very quickly in practice, very efficient. Server side, it, as Justin was mentioning, gives you not just the JavaScript with all the tags, but it gives you the HTML, CSS files themselves, not like hidden in JavaScript, just pure files. You take it, you download it, you render it, and then you get your JavaScript later. Yeah, so this is like a difference that I just saw. So for SSR, which is server-side rendering, because you get your HTML, CSS first, JavaScript later, even when your site is not interruptible, even when JavaScript is not given to you yet, you already have HTML, CSS, so you already can display it. So it's kind of nice. Even though in practice it probably takes longer to load than a client side. With client side, because of how it works, you're not giving HTML, CSS, you're just giving JavaScript that contains those elements. This is how it's done in the app, and the app is like one of the bigger libraries. And then you unpack it together, and it becomes both viewable and interactable at the same time. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get into more, I guess, practical details. So JavaScript in HTML can have multiple different ways of being embedded or being included in the file. One of the ways is to look at that, put it into script, and then put your code into between the script tags. Don't do it unless you want to like debug or do like a console log, so that you know that your program started. Don't do it. It's too hard to work with the file, because usually your JavaScript files alone, because they contain everything that you need for the page to function. So if you try to put every bit of logic between the script tags, you're just going to have like 500 lines of code, and half of them go to be JavaScript, and you're not going to be sure where it does your HTML stuff. So please don't just put it between the script tags. It's a bad practice. It's not good for reading. I don't think there's any performance changes that I know, but it's just a bad way of working with that. So what we usually do is that we put a source attribute and specify the source of where the JavaScript is located. Also, if you see here, it says that not just JS, that means that JS. So usually in industry, what they do is that there are certain tools which you can use that compress all your JavaScript code in a single line that just continues forever, not forever. It just compresses all your code to like single line, just so it's harder to read. I think that's the only reason. I don't see any other reason. It's not a true reason, but it's just a funny thing. That's what you should do in industry. That means that JS. In VS Code, I think there's a special extension, not VS Code, in Visual Studio. Their IDE, through IDE, they have a special extension to do it. So for convenience and ease of use, just specify the name of the file in source, and usually that file wouldn't reside in your local computer, it would reside on a server, but the logic is the same. You just put it there, put the specification of the file there. So again, embedded is between the scripts, inside the HTML tag, there's going to be a script tag, and you put it inside that script tag. The input it is just, you specify my script, you put it in source, and it works. Okay, so now we're going to get to jQuery. So jQuery is a JavaScript library that is designed to simplify HTML DOM manipulation. Manipulation and tree traversal. So what it does in practice is that it just uses the syntax to work with the elements, with those tags that we discussed last lecture or last seminar. So it does it through something called an event handler, which is also provided in vanilla JavaScript. Vanilla JavaScript just means pure JavaScript with no libraries. And it becomes kind of like recently, it's becoming more and more obsolete as JavaScript kind of has similar functionality. And many of the other libraries and frameworks kind of have something similar happening. So it's still widely used, especially if it's not like a cutting-edge application that was developed in the last like 2-3 years. It's probably using jQuery, more likely than not. And it just replaces that getElementById function of vanilla JavaScript. So it allows you to get element, just more complex syntax, a little bit better and easier to read. So jQuery syntax, or jQuery specific syntax, can be separated on 3 things, or I guess 4 things. First, it's a sign. Sign show that what I'm going to type now is in jQuery. It's not just to be interpreted as a regular JavaScript function or any other kind of module. It's a jQuery function. Then you specify what do you want, your structure. So you can get, I want to change the tag, I want to change ID, you want to change the class, like element by class, all of those things. So either one of those things will be specified in your structure. You have a separator that says, okay, when you get this type of element or element with this ID, this is what you do. Action, perform action on those kind of elements. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay. So this is something more practical. This is how you would use it. For example, you want to have all the news, well, all of the objects or all of the tags that have classes news and read to have the color gray, or have the color gray, and it's not with CSS as well, or the visual changes. So you just say, okay, this is the element I want to get. So this is the sign, this is the selection that needs the tweet. This is the method or the action that we use is CSS. And these are the arguments that you pass into that function called CSS. And the function happen to be core and change, which means specify core that it's gray. Yeah. And yes, okay. So there are 3 main things that we are going to discuss today, or 3 main types of selectors, which are usually good enough for majority of things that you want to work with. So first is a type, or what kind of tag, to specify the tag basically, or the type. So here we see double brackets. Oh no, yeah, double brackets. Quotes, yeah, thank you. Quotes, yeah. Input and the quotes just means get the element of type input. And if there are multiple elements of the type, it will get all of them. So you need to be careful. If you want not just some like abstract type, but you want, okay, I want this class of element to have these properties, you do specify that class, and it's always that something. Like if your class is login input, it's that login input. If your class is welcome page, it's that welcome page. And the most specific one, as you see, it goes kind of from the most general, the tag, to more specific, the class. Class usually has multiple elements. To the most specific is ID. Usually ID is unique to each element. And it's hashtag ID. So it's going to be, for example, if you have like welcome page login, it's going to be hashtag welcome page login. And it's going to be specifically this login, this button, this element. Not going to affect anything else unless you have repeating IDs, which is, you shouldn't. IDs should be individual. Okay. This is just a review of what we already learned. I don't think we necessarily need it. I think it would be nicer if we have a little bit more time to practice. So we are going to just skip it. But again, don't necessarily need a browser to run a JavaScript. You can just download Node.js run it on your local machine, or run in IDE. JS files are usually not embedded strictly or just like fully in the in HTML code. They are imported, or like you put a link to the file, and then in the separate file you specify your JavaScript. It's easier to debug, it's easier to write, it's easier to play. Yes, that's everything that we need today. Okay, now, so I have this big,
Here, I can write it.
but we don't really need it. Only thing that we need today is UDOP. It's UDOP CRS1, tiny URL,
Oh, yeah.
tinyurl.com, UDOP CRS1. So this should take you to SharePoint, which is going to allow you to download. Go to reference to that presentation, and then from that presentation, you get to that website, because that website is not allowed to be shared directly with TinyURL. I'm not quite sure why. My presumption is because it's an online IDE. So you will need to log in through your UDOP account. Go to tinyurl.com, UDOP CRS1. It will get you to this presentation. You can scroll down, second to last page, or second to last slide, copy and paste that URL. And it should take you to our small tutorial that we're going to walk through today. So again, tinyurl.com/UDOP CRS1. If you have any, yes?
We can't select the next.
Oh yes, we have it. Awesome. Great.
How will they select it?
We can select it.
Here, change the general access to the, basically they can't copy it from the slide.
How do I?
So you need to change the access on SharePoint.
That's why you use Google Docs. Nothing against Microsoft, but just use Google Docs.
Everything is Microsoft.
Yeah.
Go into your SharePoint. It's going to be the easiest, I think.
What's my SharePoint? This
Here.
is one that is showed.
I'll stop sharing the screen for just one moment, even though everybody in the room will definitely see. But or if you guys want to get start typing that URL, that might work too.
Yeah, it might take a longer time.
Daniel, can you sign in with yours? Because it's yours.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're gonna get the download.
I remember my password.
It's all good. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Share. Can I not just edit?
And then top right, there's underneath the Zoom. Can't see it, but underneath the Zoom icon, there's a share.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
Okay,
We're gonna copy this link and drop that on the PowerPoint, which should update it. So just gonna use, oh wait, that's not what we, no.
We need to get chat manager access, and you need to give them editor access. That's yeah.
Hopefully it's all you guys that just logged in. And
Okay.
sorry, folks, give us one more second. We're gonna create another tiny URL. Huh? Yeah, I know.
Okay. I guess while we're doing this, we can go through the first three together because that's what we're supposed to do anyway. And then if it works out, good. If not, well,
All right, folks, try UW CLS 4. See if that gives you editing access.
I've created a tiny URL of a Word doc that's shared with you all, and you can just write UW CLS.
Okay, your CLS should give you access to the Word doc with the.
Perfect.
Why don't we just tiny URL the code sandbox, or you not able?
It won't let
because
you.
it won't let you.
It won't.
It's an idea, so it
Yeah.
just says not supported.
Yep. So Jasleen just shared that all with you.
It upstairs, yeah, please go share that. Let's see. Good folks.
Yeah, it'll be a Google Doc, so go ahead and sign in.
Yeah, with yours, any email, I think we will find probably it's Google now.
I'm gonna reshare the
Yeah,
screen.
if you're there, please say that on there. Yeah, folks, you're on the tutorial or code sandbox something. Awesome.
Woohoo!
Okay. Let's get another minute or so. We're ready to log in. And we're going to proceed to interactive part. Yeah, so so what you're going to see is going to look something like this. Probably not immediately obvious what it is, but we are going to explore together every part of it. So okay, I assume that everybody's there. Okay, good. Yeah, again, just for people on Zoom, tiny.com/UWCLS. It's going to take you to Google Doc. Copy the link, paste it in the browser, and this is should take you here. Okay, so as you know, Java or jQuery is not native to JavaScript. It's a library. So first, before trying anything else, you need to import it. That's where usually there's a JSON file, and you just specify, okay, I want jQuery. In this case, I specified the version of the jQuery in dependencies, and it just means this is what I want. I want jQuery of this version. Please let me get it. That's why I choose this RD, because it's a little more realistic than just using it directly. Then here, every jQuery statement usually starts with this document ready function. It says that when document is ready, when document is loaded, do something. And now we're going to specify what we're going to do. So first, let's come back to our example. If you remember last time we left with that page, I took it better, but it was just a login page. And it was just there. It just presented you with those two options, and you couldn't really do much. Well, it did allow you to input things, but you can log in and you can just get into something with absolutely secret information, for sure. Why? Because there is no protection. Even though it doesn't display your password, it doesn't check it. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to try to make it progressively more realistic. So if you ever went to a login page, does it just let you in? Doesn't matter what you type? What does it require you to do? It requires you to use
the correct username password.
Yes, correct username and password combination. In this case, I guess it's not as much login as much as like registration page in a way, but they're going to be slowly building up to building a function that allows us to check the user's password, and if it's strong enough, if it corresponds to whatever we need it to correspond to, then it lets you in. If not, you're out. So first, we have this simple function because before working with anything and before modifying anything, you just want to know what we're working with. We want to put few console statements usually, or put few toggle breakpoints, and just go through the code and see, okay, when I click this, this happens. When I click that, that happens. So that's exactly what it is. If we go to our console, what I did is, well, here I just enabled the button so that it looks nice and it works. But ultimately, we are going to get our username form. By form, I mean that thing. And we're going to output console.log, you interacted with username field. So what happens in this case is that we have our selector. Does anybody remember what kind of selector it is? Is it an ID selector, type selector, tag selector, the hashtag symbol? No? Extra points?
Class.
ID.
Yes, it is ID. So this means that the only element that's going to be chosen is not the one with the class of submit form or with the tag, even though such tag doesn't exist. So the only element that's going to be chosen is the one with, well, we discussed this case, with the ID of username underscore form. Next, we have our action, and action is on. So there are different actions in jQuery. There is something called click, which will interact and will run whatever is inside the function when the user clicks out of the field. But if you want the user to have like a real-time response, so you type something and it immediately checks it, immediately gets it. The function is not immediately. The function to use or the action to use is not on. It just means that wherever there is some input, and here we specify that we are looking for input. So wherever there is any input in that form, do it. And in this case, it says, well, console.log, you interacted with username field. And console.log is just kind of like a print statement in Java. Sorry, JavaScript. So we have, again, two console.logs with the forms, one console.log with the button. So let's see whether it works. So technically, if I click here, should output something. Okay, yeah, you interacted with the username field. Okay, password. Okay, I interacted with the password field. Let's see what it lets me in. Okay, yeah, and it refreshes the page. So this is what's supposed to do. Okay, so we can see that all our elements are working. We can interact with all of them, and they register our movements. Oh, sorry, our inputs. So that's everything that you need to know for now. Just means that whatever you put there, it works, it's connected, and it's functional. So that's the first step. Now let's comment it out. Go to get to part 2.
Is it still control for / comment out? And then
Yes, almost every ID has it. Yeah, control / and it comments it out. So here we are getting a little bit further. Yeah, okay. So let's, I guess, go step by step. If we don't want our user to log in unless they have proper credentials, first we need to check whether they even inputted something. Because if the email is empty or if the password is empty, obviously they cannot log in into whatever form or whatever kind of website they have. They need to input at least something. So that's what we do here. We just check in, okay, if the value of the username form, so that val, that function just retrieves or returns the value of whatever is in that tag. In this case, the tag is with the ID of username form. So if you wanted to read it, it's like, okay, return me the value of the element with the NID of username form. This is how you would read it. And we say, okay, if it's empty, then we should disable the input and it shouldn't work. And then we see that's exactly what happens. So if I try to input only email or only password, it will not let me in. It will not even try, because why do we need to waste our computational power checking the email or checking the password? Well, we know that there's like only one is present. Obviously, the user needs to input the other one. So again, what we tend to have here is that we also record the value. So again, that val of that element. And yeah, if you wanted to create a login that displays the password, this is what you would do. So, and again, where we input the both, well, now, okay, we can get in. Okay, so this was our short part 2. And here's when it gets a little more complicated. I think still doable, but a little more complicated. Okay, I may need to refresh. So for the last one, I want to do a proper password checking function that checks whether the password has at least 8 tokens, at least 1 digit, at least 1 special character, and the tokens shouldn't be the same. So it should be just like 1, 2, whatever the password is, 1, 2 password. It should be something more complex. And I'm using the AWS Cognitive User Tools standard. So this is just a standard I arbitrarily chose. Doesn't necessarily mean it's quite good. But what we do is that we just progressively check. So if you remember, we talked about our functions in JavaScript. It's just a regular JavaScript function. Doesn't have anything to do with jQuery for now. It just checks, okay, what's the length of the string that we pass? And does it have the letters? If it does have the letters, good. If it not, it adds it to an error. If there is no numbers, it also displays an error. So it needs to be, there needs to be few letters, there needs to be a number, and the length needs to be more than 8. This is the first if statement. So if either of these conditions fails, the user is not allowed in because the password again does not correspond to our standard. So what happens next is that we are kind of doing the same thing that we've been doing before. So first, we have 2 functions, and this function is a bit different. This is kind of, you're not going to be using it that way, but that's how you can do it. So there is a statement, as a jQuery statement, specifies the attribute value disabled and specifies the opacity, which just makes that button looks like it's disabled, and it's not interactable. So it doesn't matter how many times you click it, it's never going to produce anything, never going to check anything. So it just saves you from spending resources that you don't need to spend to check unnecessary interaction or unnecessary password email combinations. So again, very similar to the last example, we have the value and we check whether the value is empty. And if not, so if there is something that is both in email and in password, then we can check it against our standard. So let's get this. Let's try to log in. Okay, it says the password must contain this digit. So my password wasn't correct. So let's see whether I can change it. Right, I'm logged in. Awesome. And I'm in a website that contains my absolutely secret information. So for the rest of the class, or rest of the seminar, you're going to take 10 minutes. I left you, I guess, a small task to do if you would be willing, which I hope you would, is to check the email. So we already checking the password. The last thing that we need to do is to check whether the email is in dot or at www.edu domain. So if it contains at www.edu, then obviously it's a good email. If you can check it, you can enter the system. If not, you should be able to enter it, which now you could because there is no checking. So for this part, all of us are going to, like, all of me, Jaslene, Zafar, Mr. Brian, they are here for your use. So if you have any questions, we'll be glad to help. But my suggestion is for the rest of the time, these 10 minutes, please just play around with it. Try to get your jQuery selectors to work. Try to interact with the elements. So what you need to do is, same like how we did it before, check whether both of the fields are not empty. And if not, if both of them are full and they have something in them, go check that value or get that value through that val function. And when you get that value, check it against some function you have, which is going to be just like it's called regular expression. It's going to be checking whether you have add.edu. Okay. So please play around with it. They're going to be here for your as your resource. But my part on presenting is done.
And with that, I'm going to formally close the Zoom and the actual presentation. Obviously, you guys are here to hang out for a little bit longer. Thank you so much, though, and this is primarily for everybody on Zoom for joining us today. We will be doing another seminar series in March on cybersecurity, so we'll be sharing out that information very shortly. But thank you again so much for attending, and have a fantastic day, everybody.